All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, and serving entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited for you to hear from my friend and our guest today, Nicole Jansen. Welcome, Nicole.
Thanks for having me, Heather. It's exciting to be here and continue this conversation that we had on my podcast a few years ago.
Right. Yeah. So Nicole and I have been connected for a few years, and I'm trying to think how we first got connected. It must have been through a mutual friend or LinkedIn, one of my favorite ways. But yeah, I was on Nicole's podcast, and then we've been in touch ever since and did a mastermind group together. And anyways, I am a big fan of Nicole. For those of you that don't know Nicole Jansen has been empowering entrepreneurs for over 30 years. Her vast experience in business, leadership, and human behavior, along with overcoming adversity in her own life, has uniquely equipped her to bring out the best in others. Her coaching clients span 5 continents and range from startup entrepreneurs focused on growing their business to industry leaders looking to use their influence to make a greater impact in the world. She is the founder of Discover the Edge and host of the Leaders of Transformation podcast, reaching listeners in over 140 countries. Now, I think, Nicole, you're just down the coast from me, right?
That's right.
Awesome.
San Diego.
San Diego. Yes, I love all my California friends, and being in the same time zone helps when it comes to connecting. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today, and so happy to have a podcast where I get to, have a conversation with you, because I'm not sure that we have connected since I launched the podcast.
Yeah, no, I think the last time we were talking was when you were launching and you had the images and you were sending them to
Getting
me
all
like,
ready.
what do you think about this? What do you think about
Yes.
that? And they were so nice. I was so impressed right off the bat. I'm like, I know she's going to be successful just because you're already a success and you do things well with excellence. But when I saw your images, I was like, oh, that's going to land so well. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's been so fun. I tell people it's been one of the best things to come out of this COVID timeframe for me. So, I know obviously your and my relationship goes back before this episode. So I know a few things about you. For folks that don't, tell us, share a few of what you consider to be some of your favorite highlights from your early days in business. How did you get started? Where did your interest in business come from? Right? I always love to hear, especially from entrepreneurs, about their roots.
Sure. Well, there's some highlights and then there's some lowlights. So we've got both of those going on.
So we welcome them all. We have shared plenty of lowlights, right? This podcast being called Guts, Grit, and Great Business. Sometimes it's the lowlights that really make us.
That's right. And I think I started off in a low light and then went highlight and then low light. So for me, I started off, my parents were entrepreneurs. I started off in business when I was in my teens. I knew I wanted to be in business. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be in business. And so I registered my company name at 16 years old. By then I was already helping my parents in their business and helping someone else in a family family friend, I should say, in a business as well. And so I was just like knee deep in sort of like the back end of business. But when I started my own business, then it was more getting to that front end of sales and marketing and getting out there. And so I actually started out going door to door. I mean, I didn't know much about what to do and how to do it, but I just figured out that if I got a product that I could sell at wholesale, buy it wholesale, sell it retail, find a customer, make the connection, that I could be successful. And so anyway, so I started doing that. I literally went door to door to different businesses, and I was selling fax machines, and then quickly realized I didn't like fax machines, didn't care about those. They was brand new. I'm dating myself, but they were literally brand new in the market. And then I quickly went to other things and ended up selling like all sorts of different things from products to services, technology to whatever. And I learned, that's where I cut my teeth. And I learned so
Mm.
much in that process. And then meanwhile, I was helping my family in their business. And that's where we actually built it to be very, very successful. And then it fell apart. And that's the low light. And it was, I learned a lot on the way up, but I actually learned more on the way down. And in
Mm.
reflecting back on what just happened and where does that leave me and what do I do next? And that's really what birthed my coaching, my training company initially. And then I added the coaching piece very shortly after Discover the Edge.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after, as people started asking me to mentor them and coach them in their businesses and in their, life and so forth. And so that's really where it all started.
Yeah. Wow. Quite a journey. And there's so many people, I think, in business that, have a different story, but a similar, path as far as creating something, losing something, like starting even from very challenging circumstances. Um, can I ask you a couple questions about that family business?
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to think if I knew that you had such a young start, like as a teenager in business. I love that. So it sounds like it was something that just kind of clicked for you and you had a natural interest in, and then being part of a family that was entrepreneurial, I'm sure had some influence there as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it that happened that caused the business to fall apart? What was the business? How did it fall apart? I am curious what your takeaways and lessons from that particular part of the journey were.
Yeah. So we had built this 8-figure business, had business in multiple countries around the world. It was
Mm.
going really well. In fact, we all thought that's what we were going to do for the rest of our life. And so I had my own business, but I had focused more and more of my attention here because it was just that we had vertical growth. It was just amazing. And it was in the direct sales business. Now my dad owned garage businesses and franchises and so forth previously. And we ended up replacing that income with this business. So he had sold those businesses, was all in with the direct sales business. And then, what happens in a lot of times, and there's some great things with that industry. There's also some downsizes
Mm.
of that industry in terms of egos. People get their ego out
Mm.
of check, and what actually happened is that you had a few zeros onto the end. People get all crazy about, greedy about money and so forth. And what happened was our upline actually went on a bit of a power trip. Okay. And so they
Mm.
wanted to do their own thing. They wanted all the credit and all of uh, the benefit of it. And and so when long story short, when they started to do their own thing and wanting to do that, it created confusion. It created dissension. They started to undermine my parents' leadership and
Mm.
trying to build relationships, go around my parents to build relationships and say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Listen to me. And so all of this started to create confusion where we had so much momentum. And then it was my parents were in the situation where they're like, what do we do with this? Right? Like, do we de-edify our upline team? Because that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So they tried to hide it and they tried to things will work out. It'll all work out.
Mhm.
It'll all be okay. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, this is not going to go well. I just had this feeling this is going to go really bad. And so part of the reason, and so we take responsibility for let's say the lack of leadership, the lack of ownership, and saying, you know what, we need to go a different direction to be able to salvage what we can and just do that. And so my parents had a hard time. They're loyal to a fault, if you will, and great, great quality. But in this particular case, it caused a lot of issues. And so anyway, that's why with the confusion, people stop, they check out, they're like, I
Mhm.
don't know, it was so great. And now it's all weird and I don't want to get involved. And so they started checking out. And so first of all, it was slowly, and then of course it picked up momentum and
Yeah.
you get this,
Yeah.
the momentum that we had in one direction, it was the upward climb, then quickly turned around
Mm.
and it went it was so fast when you look at how quickly it fell apart. And the difficult thing about it was all the relationships. You're talking about thousands of people that we had relationships with, my parents, You know, this was like they had, as I said, sold their other businesses. They were all in. I was in my mid-20s, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I mean, yeah, I had not gone to university, I was going to go to law school, funny enough. So, you know, I didn't do that because I was all
You were
into
in the
this. So,
business.
but I was
Yeah.
younger to be able to pivot and to go into the next phase of my life. Where for them, they were a
Mm.
lot older and it was difficult for them. So watching how they responded to it was a great lesson. Leadership, that's a lot of the reason why I'm so passionate about leadership, because I know the effect of poor leadership. I know the effect of
Mm.
ego and greed and, you know, being out of integrity and having yourself, putting yourself first before a mission. So that's why I'm always talking about being mission driven. My parents were mission driven, but there's a point where you've got to also look at what's actually going on and not ignore the signs of it,
Yeah.
right? And saying, you know, we need to take the bull by the horns, if you will,
Yeah.
and lead this in a different direction.
Yeah. Do you think that there would have been a way, like as you look back at that experience, could it have been salvaged? Were there protections that could have been put in place? Like, was it about not having clarity in that particular relationship, right? Business relationships are so key to our success, and they can make or break a business depending on how that business manages its relationships, right?
Yeah.
Was it about not having clarity within the relationship, or was it more just a mismatch of values?
Yeah. It was definitely the second, you know, it was
Mhm.
definitely a mismatch of values. So their values were different than our values. The way why
Mhm.
we built the business versus why they built the business were different
Mhm.
ultimately. And so that fundamentally, and you
Mhm.
know, we had seen the signs long, long before. This was not really a surprise, if you
Right.
will.
You'd seen some
Eh,
red flags. I call those
But
red
you're,
flags, right?
yeah, but you see, in that industry, the challenge with that industry is that you're stuck, right? It's not like you know, unless you move your entire team, which you know you really can't do, right? So but you're there, like you can't fire your upline, if you will. You can't, you know, even your downline, you can't really fire them. You're kind of like stuck. So you want to choose the people you're in business with really wisely. And that's for any business,
Yeah.
but especially that business. And so, you know, there was this mismatch where it was really about, as I said, like them having the credit. And one in particular was the wife, especially in the relationship. But it wasn't even just, you know, one particular person, although she was that
Mhm.
catalyst, but there was others that kind of, you know, you have a bunch of people that, you know, some people have never had a business before. Some people are very savvy. My parents attracted some
Mhm.
very savvy business owners, but there's some people that have never been in business for themselves. This is their first experience. They've not been taught really to be a leader in a company
Mhm.
or to translate some of those skills over. And so this is their first experience. And now it's like they're all that and more, and they're getting all these accolades and everything. And it can go to people's heads. And
Yeah.
I've seen that many, many times over. And so I just have a different perspective. Even when I see people that are successful, I say that I respect success. I honor respect. I do not success. I do not idolize it. And there's a difference,
Mhm.
right? So I look at it and say, wow, congratulations. But I also know that that person, I'm not putting them on a pedestal. I'm not expecting them to
Mm.
be perfect. They're human, right?
Yeah.
And so I've learned, one of the things I've learned is not to follow so blindly, which we see a
Mhm.
lot right now with all these gurus and everything that follow blindly this person said, and so forth. I take all this information in. Thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate all that. And then I take it under advisement and filter it through my own life experience. And for me,
Mhm.
I do use the Bible as also a way to filter it through. But God's word, it's like what's worked for thousands of years, you know, what some principles, right? It's like looking at those
Mhm.
principles and saying, does this make sense? Does this land well? And then go and make my decisions from there. And so that's where when you don't have those core values put in place right up front, if you don't have a mission, and even with your team and have agreements around it saying, look, this is where we're going. And if somebody gets off track, you can say, hey, wait a second, time out. This
Mhm.
is what we're here for. Let's remember what we, you know, and marriages are like that, you know, relationships in
Yes.
general. Like we got to remember why we're here. What was the initial intent? When the emotions are high, intelligence goes down. So we need to bring the emotions down, calm down. We look at it objectively and what's really going to work for us all to win versus an either or scarcity mindset, which is, somebody's going to be more successful, or if you are more successful or you get more credit, then I get less, and all of this stuff that's just messy. And it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Well, I can see that that's such a clear example of how quickly things can go sideways when you don't have certain key things in place for your business, right? The time for a mission statement, to carve out your values, to, have a really clear statement about what you're doing as a team and a company and where you are at in the marketplace and what your collective goals are. Time to have those in place is before you're bringing on and building out team, right? Because once you have the wrong person in a seat, it can be really hard to correct things that relate so deeply down to like a human's core values, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like if you're building a house, I just had this picture. If you're building a house and a storm comes, the time to build the foundation and all of that is not during the storm.
No.
It's before the storm. And I love what one of my mentors years later, we're having this conversation, was explaining about this idea of having a code of honor and not just your values, but how you live out those values. What do they practically look like? You can say respect is a core value. What does that actually mean? What does it mean to support each other in business? What does it mean to be mission driven? What do some of these things actually mean? And so when he described it and the importance of it and how it holds a team together, even in the midst of under pressure and so forth, I was like, light bulbs are going off. And I was like, you're just describing exactly what wasn't in place that we needed in place. And if it were in place, we probably could have saved ourselves a lot of heartache. And so that's nowadays, it's like I talk to clients, and that's where I get to learn all the stuff, that mistakes we made and the life lessons and all that. I get to help business owners and leaders to avoid some of those same mistakes. I don't usually work with direct sales businesses. I have, but that's not really my focus area. But I talk about traditional business. It's the same thing. Like you said, you put somebody in a seat, especially in a seat, let's say, of partnership. Another mentor of mine actually said something which really stuck with me. He says, you can't do a good deal with a bad partner. Now, the funny part is the guy who actually said that became a bad partner. But anyway, that's a whole, the irony was like, oh, that's so true. Hello. But that's another story.
Right.
But it's true though, right? Is you got to look at, who are you getting in business with? It's like a marriage.
Yeah.
And it's as complicated, or even possibly even more complicated, to unwind that later, because now it's not just about you. It's like kids. You got children involved. You got all this other stuff going on. Grandkids, maybe, depending on how the length of the time that marriage been around. Well, the business is the same way. You've got people involved. You've got customers. You've got a brand. You've got reputation. You've got all these things. So not to scare your audience to go, oh my gosh, like I have to have this all worked out ahead of time. But you've got to have a starting point and build that foundation. So when you start off in a business, this, like you just kind of put it out there, and there's phases of a business. So you're in that, emergence and even invisible phase, you're doing certain things, but then there comes a point in time early on where you are kind of like locking, you've tested the waters and you're kind of getting a feel of it. And then you're like, okay, this is the direction we're going. And now that's when you're actually having the putting the foundation in place. You can go check out the land, survey some different areas. Oh, we could do this, we could do that. But then there's a point where you actually, break ground and start building a foundation.
Yeah. Well, and it really is true that, you have to plan for where you're going, not for where you are. And so many businesses end up doing things on the fly or not having that foundation. And they just don't know, I think, to think of some of those core components as foundational, right? They think like, oh, I'll address those things when I need them. And that's just not how business works or how you build it. You needed that support yesterday, right before the storm hits. I love what you said about running, especially in a marketplace of gurus, running because there's so many people that have business advice that are teaching and training on different topics, personal development space. Like I know where your work lives, and it's in the business and personal development space, right? You're a very mission driven, values centered person, and that starts with the individual. And teaching that stuff, I feel like there's so many ways that people can end up following somebody that they think they can trust. But I would love to hear your thoughts more on what people can do to really make sure, because I believe the same thing. You hire somebody, whether it's a business coach, whether it's somebody that's going to train you in some specific area, it's your job to determine what their role is, not their job. And I think so many people get that wrong, and they reverse it. They think like, oh, they're the guru, they're the person, they're going to tell me what I need. And I feel like it's completely backwards.
Well, and fundamentally, if you come at it and saying, I need somebody else to tell me what to do, therein lies the problem to start off with, because it's your business, it's your life. You're going to be the one who's going to have to live with the consequences or the benefit. You're going to get to enjoy the rewards, but you're also going to have to deal with whatever consequences, the impact of that, right, wrong, or different. So you got to take charge, just like with our health. We need to take charge of our health. We need to take charge of our, our relationships. We are responsible. We are not just 50% responsible or 20% responsible. We are 100% responsible. So when I'm hiring, I'm looking at somebody that I may follow, whether it's on social or whether it's formally, even as a coach, I'm looking at now I may not know exactly what I need, but I kind of have a sense, and it's checking in and saying, what am I actually looking for here? Before you get on the phone with somebody who's a really slick salesperson who's going to try to tell you, let me tell you what you need.
Yes.
You got to have some kind of sense of what it is. Where's the issue and the gap? Now you may say, I don't know. My struggle is that I'm stuck and I don't know. So then my goal is I want to be unstuck. And so then I get on the phone with somebody and maybe they can help me to get unstuck. And can they do that? And does it resonate? But so it really comes down to, though, in terms of determining if it's a right fit. Yes, there's chemistry. They obviously have to be competent. They have to have done, they have to have done what they're teaching. Okay. Yeah. And I love the fact that we have like a gazillion coaches out there and so forth. And we need, in order to be a great coach, you have got to have done the inner work yourself. If you're going to be a great business coach, you've got to have built a successful business, and not just a 6 months, right, 6 year. Like there is a point. I'm not saying it has to be 30 years, but it's the same like myself. But it has to be enough time that you've seen that sort of like the highs and lows, where you can actually guide somebody through the minefield that you've already been through. So you want to look at somebody, do they have that? We talk about core values. I look at, does this person have integrity? Are they consistent? Are you high emotion, low intelligence? Are they just hyping you up? Getting you all excited about the possibility without the substance following? Well, then, when you're in high emotion, you make poor decisions, right? So it's looking at that. It's looking at, who is this person? What is do they have what I would like, really? And it's not about the trappings. It's not about the Lamborghini sitting off there, which they may have rented, by the way, because that happens.
Right.
People, and lean against it. It's really, do they have the kind of life that I truly want? Do I even know what it is that I am looking for? And so getting really clear on that so that you can choose the right coach. I've had 400, almost just shy of 400 people on my podcast, a lot of coaches, a lot of consultants. Yeah. And I've even had people that are like, hey, I could coach you and so forth. And so there's a lot of invitations to do that. Right. And of course, this is similarly, I could coach you as well. So I'm also a coach. But so when we're having this conversation, I'm evaluating who this person is. Do they know how to actually, do what they're teaching? Do they even have the skills, let's say, as a coach? Do they have the coaching skills? Because just because they're successful and effective at what they do doesn't make them a great coach to teach others. That's like a salesperson becoming a sales manager, and that generally doesn't go well.
Right.
It's a totally different set of skills. But do they have the ability to now not just do it themselves, but to actually help others? It's funny because when you build a franchise system, and you know this, I'm sure, with working with businesses, a lot of times I've had entrepreneurs come to me and they say, because I've owned franchise. I told you my dad has owned franchises. I've worked on both sides of the franchise. I've had franchisor clients. And it's so interesting because people will say, oh, I want to build this out. I have this idea and I want to franchise it. Well, before you franchise anything, you need to build a corporate, you need to build a system. You have a proof of concept, and not just one. You need to have a couple of them so you know you can do it yourself and you can duplicate it to someone else. Okay, now I have a system that worked for me, and now I have a system that worked for someone else. Now I can prove that if I can perhaps do it with another person, another person, then I can start teaching that.
Yeah. Well, you're right that the distinction between being able to do and teach is a big one. So many people are able to do, but if they're not able to translate that in a way that makes something actionable and really supportive for somebody else, there's going to be a gap. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of following somebody like that with big promises and here's what I've done, and can really be challenged when it comes to getting results themselves.
And they feel like, yeah, I see them. I know that they've done it. I'm not getting the information from them. I'm not learning from them how they're doing it. And it's like they have this secret sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they could have this secret sauce and it works for them and it's fantastic. But and that's where my direct sales mind comes back into the play, is like, is it duplicatable? Is it replicatable? One of the things that when you have an organization of that size, even when you're growing, you want to be thinking about all the time is that if what I'm doing right now was duplicated 1,000 times over, would I like the result? Would the result be good? Would it serve the people involved? Because that's the real issue. Is it duplicatable? Is it replicatable? So I may have a secret sauce and it may work for me, but I've got to be able to extract the things that worked for me that are the system that will work in all these different scenarios and so forth. And what's the foundation? Coming back to the foundation, what's the principles? This, I'm talking, to the choir here, because that's the same thing with legal, right? It's like, there's certain things I know on your website, for example, you have your templates, right? It's like, okay, these are some of the things that you're going to need, but that's because you worked with enough people to know this works, right? And so it's not just, I worked with this one client and now I'm going to template everything off of that. That might work for them, but you're not taking into consideration all the other factors. So
yeah, no, that's right. It's and that piece about having somebody be able to duplicate results so that those results are consistent among their clients. I mean, I think the most important ways we can check folks that we decide to work with is by talking to other people who have worked with them, right? And I think so many people do get caught up, like you say, in kind of looking at the shiny outside, all of the entrapments of somebody in business and making decision based on that versus really doing what I would just consider regular due diligence. Like, imagine if the online world didn't exist. What would you be doing to check on a business and whether it was legitimate, right? You'd be talking to people.
Yes.
Right. And I think that, that can go a long way in double checking, who is the right fit to support you in growing and building your business. So I'm curious, I want to dig into some of the stuff that you're doing. Obviously, I know about your podcast. If you are listening now, you need to hop over and check out Nicole's podcast. She has an amazing podcast called Leaders of Transformation. Like she said, over 400 episodes, I think now. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Tell us about
and you were episode 151.
Right. That's been a little while. 151. Yes. I know, that was fun. Tell us, because when did you start that podcast?
2015.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started Discover the Edge in 2005. And then
Okay.
2015 was the podcast. So
And Discover the Edge is your business coaching business, right?
yes. And I'm now gradually transitioning everything over from a branding perspective over
Mhm.
to leaders of transformation, but I
Got
still
it.
have both. Yeah.
Still have both.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about the folks that you work with. I know you've had a wide range of clients, right? Who do you really love to work with, and what kinds of topics and things do you help them tackle?
Yeah. Great question. So there's a lot of clients that I've literally worked with mom and pop, small businesses, and then I've worked with franchisors and franchisees that have owned like some of the top franchises of large, huge systems and so forth. I had a client one time who was fun to work with. It was interesting, unique for sure, and he was into lunar exploration and doing workshops and bringing all these NASA scientists and engineers together. And so there was a whole dynamic and talking about, so I was working with his team, but also about the workshops and so forth and sponsorships and developing that out and talk about like an interesting, different approach, right? So
Business model.
you got salespeople and then you got like engineers
Lunar
and science.
exploration. Yeah.
Like, all right, this is different. So the principles or the fundamentals are consistent though. It's mindset, it's strategy, and it's follow through and execution. And I'm really big on teaching a model which I call the results model. I actually learned it from one of my mentors and then kind of built on it for myself. Is results come from behaviors and actions come from the mindset that we have. But then what actually influences our mindset? We can say, I need to change my mindset. How do we do that? Like, what are the elements? And so that's where I get into personalities and the strengths of a person or an organization or like an entity, right? What are the strengths? And then from a human perspective, from individuals and leaders, is like, what are the human needs? How do they get their needs met? People on the team and everything. And then the big piece is really the belief systems, right? What do you believe about yourself, others, and the world around you? And so that creates this self-concept and ultimately this life concept that, when we look at the results that someone wants, the results will never exceed their self-concept and their life. It's how they see the world. So we need to expand this out. No matter what we're doing, it always comes back to like, okay, where are you at with this in relation to what it is you're looking to accomplish? And then how do we expand this and align this to be able to match what it is that you're looking to create? And then it's about the strategy, and then it's about the follow through and execution to get it done.
Yeah. I love what you said. The results will never exceed their self-concept. That to me, that feels like another way of saying, what I regularly say, which is the business, the process of building a business is limited by our personal development, right? Those
Absolutely.
things are inextricably linked. And so I love the way that you said that the results that we achieve in our business will never exceed a person's self-concept.
Yeah. And I want to give credit to, that's from Blair Singer, one of my mentors, the one who initially built this model. He used to say that, and it just so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's, I think it's so fascinating in the business world because you do find people who focus exclusively on the business side, right? Fundamentals, strategy, tactics, etc. But if you never get to this other half, it's like literally a full half of the equation, you're not going to fix things for somebody. I mean, in my opinion, right?
And vice versa. If you work on personal development, there are many people who have been networking junkies, seminar junkies, jumping around all over the place, learn all this really cool stuff personally, supposedly, right? Like, I've got all this growth, this inner growth happening, but if it's not translating into action, if it's not translating into fruitfulness in some way, then maybe there's a disconnect. And so, yeah, there's a lot of times where coaches will work even one
One
area
half.
or the other. And so I always see it's like it has to go together, because I can talk strategy all day long. I'm a really good strategist. But if you don't believe that it's possible, or you're the one, saying, this is, the obstacle here, and this will never work because, and that person and this person, all of that, right? Messiness, then it doesn't matter how good the strategy is. It won't happen. In fact, there was a franchisor once that I cold called, and he said, I was pitching some training or whatever. And he said, I had met him at a franchise show, and he said, oh, I get all these trainers, they're always calling me and, pitching me 5 times a week kind of thing. And he said, and so he was like, I'm not interested. If my franchisees would just do what they're supposed to do, everything would be fine. And I'm on the other side of the line. This is back in the day when it was just phone. And I was like, thank you for that. That was a gift. So I said to him, would you like to know why that is? Yeah, I want to know why that is. And it's like, that started the conversation. And then he hired me to work with all his franchisees, because it's like, you've been telling them what to do. But when I looked at his franchisees, I realized so many of them were a mismatch. They should never have bought a franchise. They're not a right fit. They don't have the right attitude for it. And it's like, you can try to convince them, and pulling teeth, it's not going to work.
Yeah. It's well, and it, for some, like, business becomes a very complex equation very quickly. Back to the right buns in the right seats, right? You have to have a match on some of this, and understanding what it takes to be successful in certain kinds of business models, when we're creating certain kinds of business partnerships, right? That quote about you can never have a great partnership with a bad partner, or whatever, however you said that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's what I tell
people. Can't do a good deal with a bad partner.
There you go. You can't do a good deal with a bad partner. And this is what I tell folks all day long, is like, because I'm in the legal contracts, kind of back end structural world, but, a contract will not save you from a bad business deal, right?
Yeah.
A contract will not save you from a bad business partner, which is why, having conversations on the front end is so critical. If you're going in and you're building what you think is going to be a 50-50 partnership, but you haven't gone through all the questions together of like, okay, what happens if one of us gets sick? What happens if one of us gets bored and just wants out of the business? Those are probably 2 different exit plans.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And people don't always know how to properly vet somebody else. Anyways, I could go way deep into that topic, but it really is true that, regardless of the business, you have to put a lot of time and attention into connecting with and building relationships with the right people for your business.
Yeah. And then business is really not that hard. It's difficult when you don't have some of these pieces in place. And now you're having to do some fix-its, like the house, right?
Yeah.
So you build this house, you build it solid, you have good contractors, good people working on it, architect, planned it out ahead of time. You're going to enjoy this house. But if you don't, it's going to be one problem after the other. It's kind of like that movie Money Pit. And I know I've had clients who have built like multi-million-dollar homes and stuff. And it's like one thing after the other. And, had somebody one time that, they just moved in, brand new home, and the water, somehow the roof, wasn't secure or whatever. And so the water came down 4 levels through the walls. And it's like, and so when you have the right people, you don't want to go cheap on certain things, get it set up properly. And then you'll be able to enjoy your house, and you'll be able to enjoy the same way you'll be able to enjoy your business, and you'll be able to have fun, make money, make a difference, do all those things. But if you don't have, like you talk about from a legal perspective, you don't have those things in place, you can run into a lot of problems. And that's why I believe that every business owner in my books should have a good lawyer, a good accountant, a good financial advisor. So the accountant is the type, will prepare your tax returns and all that, but also do the strategy on it and help you plan. The financial advisor can help you to build your wealth,
Yeah.
right? So they manage what you have. The financial
Right.
advisor can help you build, you keep them out of jail, out of
Right.
problems, right? And then a good business coach that kind of
Yes.
brings it all together and helps them to step back and work on their business and make
Right.
sure
Have
that
the
all those
map.
pieces
That's
have the map.
right. Have the
Yeah.
map. Make sure they know where all those pieces fit.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part of, like, piece of the work that you do? What absolutely lights you up in your work with your clients?
I do love strategy and I
I
love
can tell that you
brainstorming
do.
ideas. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, we could do this, we could do that. Blah, blah, blah. And
Mhm.
so that's fun. What's fun about that also is seeing the possibility in their eyes where they go, wow, this can actually work. And so it comes back to that mindset piece. I love helping. If I can help people just transform the way they see themselves, the way they see others, and the
Mhm.
relationships and the dynamics, the way they see their business, the way they see the world around them, then it's like that to me lights me up, because that's where the possibility, that's where they can see where the potential can go, or maybe revive what they hoped they wanted to do in their business, but maybe they're at a point where like they're not sure if that's even possible, but then we reignite that possibility in them.
Yeah.
And that to me is just seeing that light come on in their eyes, and they're like, yeah, I got this, I can do this. And it's an interesting point with that is because I got this, not, well, Nicole, you're so great. It's not actually about that, because one of the greatest compliments is when my clients actually feel like I can do this. I'm,
Yeah.
capable. That's the goal of a good coach, I believe, is so that you're not dependent on me. Because if I have to tell you everything that you need to do, like when people ask me, oh, what do I do here? So, and I'll be flipping it back to them, right? Not because I don't know the answer, but this is your business, comes back to your response. You're going to be living with this, right? So it's got to be you're going to be doing the work.
You've
It's
got to
be,
decide.
you got to
Yeah.
decide. I can lead you and help you and give you ideas, but you ultimately need to decide. And so when they have that confidence and they're just flying along and they're, and again, that transformation of themselves and the inner and the outer, that's the best thing. Yeah.
Oh, I can tell how happy it makes you. Just for folks who are not watching the video, it's really apparent how much that lights you up. What, on the flip side, in your work with clients, what do you find to be the most challenging or frustrating?
So I pick my clients very specifically because one thing and there was actually a point in time a number of years back where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because I was in LA, I was living in LA. There was a lot of personal stuff. Speaking of the correlation, a lot of personal stuff going on that was drama and challenges and so it affected me. And I was starting to attract these clients that were very resistant, that were out of integrity, and that's no fun. And I do not like that. And so if I smell it, from a while, I was like, we're going to call that out. And I've fired clients before because I'm like, you know what? You are not, I can't take your money, right? Honestly, I cannot do it, because a greater part of my compensation, like I was just sharing, is like the results, the impact.
Yeah.
And so that part's not absolutely not fun for me. And you've got to be willing, you're going to do the work. I had one client one time who was like, basically wanted to transfer the responsibility of the business and growth to me. And it's like, no. Let's just back up here and let's make sure we're clear. I coach, you how to play on the
you
field.
go do. Yes.
And I give you all the tools. So that's really for me, the piece in terms of like logistical and so forth, I mean, administratively, and it's all,
right.
none of that stuff. It's not really super fun, but I mean, I can do it in my sleep because I'm kind of a organized person.
Yeah.
So I don't think that any of those things really stand out.
Yeah.
I love having people that do the things that I don't like doing. So like podcast post-production, I, delegate it out and delegate all that stuff that's not fun delegate it out to people who think it's fun and
Mhm.
let them do it. And so that I can do, what I do best. And that's really, I think, a good lesson for entrepreneurs is like, don't do things that you don't enjoy. Don't try to figure it out on your own and say, I'll slug through this, because you must just hire somebody to do it, or work your business enough that you can afford to hire somebody to, who actually knows what they're doing, just like you, right? Like
Mhm.
hire somebody who actually knows how to set up a contract rather than trying to piecemeal it off of Google,
Right.
and getting
Yes,
yourself into trouble and not
totally.
being good at it anyway.
Well, and it gets back to the point you made about like how much it lights you up when people reconnect with that original vision that they had for their business, because it's easy to get away from that. And I think
Yeah,
what you were just talking about is people taking on too much, not hiring the right support when they need it, can get you really out of alignment with with that vision. You're bogged down by all this other stuff, right?
that's right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think having a business coach where they've got outside eyeballs on what you're doing, they can help you spot those opportunities, spot timeline issues that you may not be spotting yourself, to help keep your business vibrant and alive and really moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Nicole, I feel like I could just keep chatting. So many questions for you. We are at the top of the hour. I do want to find out from you, for folks that are listening, where do you like to connect online? Where would you have, for somebody that's thinking like, I need to go find Nicole, see what she's up to, visit her podcast, where would you send them to?
Well, first of all, my website is
Mhm.
leaderstransformation.com. There's that's where the podcast
Mhm.
is. There's also, a page there about coaching. So you can learn a little bit more about me. If you want to schedule a 45-minute consult, me, I'm not a fluff, type person. I get right into it. It's practical. You get
Mhm.
takeaways from that. And then if it's something where, we determine that it's possibly a good fit to work together, we talk about that. But I'm really about high value, so that's a way that people can find out a little bit more. So leadersoftransformation.com. But then I'm also on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on all the different
Mhm.
platforms, but LinkedIn is a good way to connect with me. And the podcast, of course, is on the website. It's
Yep.
also on YouTube, because some people love
Awesome.
watching videos and maybe putting them on high speed or whatever, watching
Yep.
them on YouTube. I do that,
Guilty right
totally do
here.
that. And
Yep.
so that's a great place to find me as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, for folks that are listening, you can find all of those links and a few others at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. We'll share your social media links. We'll share your website. I can't believe you just offered a 45-minute like initial consult. If you're listening, I would jump all over that. I know that Nicole has has a full book of business. That is probably not something that is going to stay open for very long. So, Nicole, you're so generous. You've always been generous. It's one of the things that I love about you. What final either action step or takeaway would you like somebody who's listening to be thinking about or like going to do right now?
Hmm. To do right now, it might be
Mm-hmm.
the question is really a being question of checking in with yourself and saying, why are you in business in the first place? So I always go back with clients to that first, like you said, starting point. Why are you in business in the first place? What prompted that? And then you build from there. So get back to that. If you've forgotten it, maybe you've gotten distracted. Now you're into all these daily operations and things you got to do. Get back to your why and reignite that spark.
Mm, it's so important. I mean, that is just so clear, because being in the bogged down phase of business, if that's where you are, like get out of that. That is not sustainable. Get back to your why and figuring out, why did you do it in the first place, right? I always remind people less than 10% of people choose to become entrepreneurs. It's a slim margin. Like there's a big reason in there why people choose this. So I love that reminder to get back to that why. Nicole, so great to see you. I appreciate you and your time and your willingness to talk about anything and everything in our conversation. I really hope you'll come back and join me again here soon.
Oh, well, thank you, Heather. I've enjoyed it. And hopefully it'll be of benefit to your listeners as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. If you are listening, pop over, leave us a rating and a review. If you enjoyed this conversation with Nicole and some of the wonderful gems of advice that she left for us, leave her a review, leave me a review. It'd be great to have your feedback. Nicole, thanks for being here today.
Thanks again.